Hello there, this is Cridical from Cridical Media, just taking a look at the 2025 release of Superman, The Last Days of Lex Luthor, mainly from Mark Waid, Bryan Hitch, and yes, Kevin Nowlan. I'll give him some credit because the inks on this book are very important, and what we usually do at this channel is give you an idea of what to expect if you ever come across these books in the wild. So we go over the exterior, some bonus material, art and plot points, and then a brief review at the end. Now this series, to be honest, this book, it has been coming out for quite a long time. I remember the third issue being delayed quite immensely, and that's actually an interesting thing because sometimes with books, if I'm reading the series and I'm really liking it or I'm liking where it's going, I'll kind of hold off and intentionally wait to finish it until it comes out in a collected like this. And that's kind of what I did with this particular release. But in any case, yes, as you're kind of noticing, it is more of a square magazine format as per the DC Black Label. And even though it's a DC Black Label, it's funny. DC Comics, they have like three major labels. They have the main DC Comics, they have DC Black Label, which kind of replaced Vertigo for a few years. And then they have now the new rebranded DC Vertigo for their mature storytelling. So it's like whenever DC comes out with a Black Label book, it pretty much only seems to stand for Elseworld stories like this one. So while it has that label, I would say there's not really much mature content in this one. It's mainly just an Elseworld story. And as per the name, kind of fitting, right? But anywho, back to the nature of this channel. At least looking at the exterior, it has a very prominent design, almost a religious effect that Bryan Hitch was going for with this one. So very standard though, I would say. I do feel like the graphic design does kind of feel flat in the long run. On the spine though, we have some yellow lettering and your typical DC fare. At least they did go with the more modern DC logo these days, or modern old, whichever way you want to put it. And yes, just a nice, of course, splash image from within the series. And, your typical fare with the synopsis. So, not bad in that respect. It does say ages 17 and up. In all honesty, this could be read by anyone. It really doesn't get too graphic, or I don't even think there's even that much harsh language at all. Actually, there is none almost. So in that light, at least underneath the dust jacket though, they do have this nice wraparound image from one of the panels from within. I think it was from within the third issue. So, nice wraparound in that respect. Just Superman and Lex fighting a whole bunch of Brainiac drones or droids or whatever. So not bad in that light. The book isn't too long. I mean, the story itself is about 150 pages-ish. I think the book total is around 170, with the bonus material and whatnot. And speaking of bonus material, let's take a look at that here. Admittedly, not too much going on. It is going to be your typical fare with, the variant covers and a little bit of panel design work. But you know what? Let's just take a ride nonetheless, because I have to admit, this artist here, Chris Samney, he evokes a lot of that Darwin Cook feel. And I do feel like, that artist, he's going to be showing up a lot more these days. You're going to see a lot more of him. There's Kevin Nowlan himself, the inker of this story, but with his own cover. Awesome, if you ask me. Yannick Paquette, who I find is very similar to Bryan Hitch's art style. Awesome Doc Shaner, probably the winner of the overall, of course, variant covers, if you ask me. Just it was a perfect muted kind of appeal to it. But you're starting to notice, though, some of these variants have certain familiar traits to them. And that's kind of go hand in hand with my little critique at the end of this video here. But you're kind of just seeing the panel design. And oddly enough, for a hardcover, there's surprisingly promotional material in it. Now, it is 2025 when this book releases, so the Superman film is also coming out. I can understand why they did this, but just know that usually when you get a hardcover, they rarely have any promotional material. This is usually something that a trade does. But one nice little bit of flair is that the book has these bookends with a prominent Superman flying design. So it's not bad there, and I believe it's at the beginning as well. Yep. So not bad there as well. Now for the art and plot points. Well, with a book like a title like this, The Last Days of Lex Luthor, it is pretty much on the nose. So yeah, the one thing I do appreciate though is the entry point of this narrative, where yeah, it's just it's Clark just at the Daily Planet, just working on a story. I love the little minor detail of his his little ingrown beard here. It does play in toward the ending of this book because it's kind of done in a media res fashion. This takes place after the end of this narrative. But one thing I do like is how it kind of harkens back to a lot of Superman's lore throughout this whole narrative. Because it does kind of go over that time period where Lex was in Smallville. And that's where he and Lex first, of course, met. And where he somehow always reminisces there was a good person in there the whole time. But in any case, the narrative does begin with your typical fare. Yeah, big robot attacking the city. Turns out to be Lex. There's Superman to stop him. But then the whole crux of the narrative is given within the first 10 pages. That basically Lex was just trying to get Superman's attention, because apparently while Lex was at least testing some sort of new mineral, he got exposed to something, a disease that's killing him, and he can't seem to find a cure. And for Lex Luthor to say something like that, where even Lex himself can't find a cure, that's a pretty big deal. That pretty much eliminates a lot of other people on the planet who can help. But as mentioned, the narrative often goes back to their time in Smallville where, sure, as aggro as Lex was, he still had this one little weakness for Clark. He didn't treat Clark with any sort of true friendship or whatnot. But he didn't go after Clark compared to the way he used to antagonize the rest of the townsfolk. So, I don't know, maybe he was like the one outlet that almost gave Clark a chance. Gave Lex a chance to maybe be a real person. But as you're kind of going through the narrative, yeah, Superman's trying a lot of different things of his own to try and help Lex in this case. It creates this global hysteria where the world now knows that Superman's literally trying to save Lex Luthor's life. So it creates that whole political climate. Why is Superman doing it? Should he even be trying to help a monster like this? And all that jazz. So, of course, it's going to go through the typical fare. But therein lies now where I'm starting to get into a bit of the criticism. This book is doing a lot of surface level storytelling, a lot of kind of ground that's covered that you would expect it to. And I wouldn't say that's necessarily a good thing. It's basically just a story that's going through the motions. So yeah, if Superman has to try and help Lex with a problem like this, it makes sense he's going to go to the fortress, try there first. He's going to rule out even the Kandorians. And at least now he's going to go into the Phantom Zone, try and maybe, give Lex a bit more time. Because at least in the Phantom Zone, maybe he can live a little longer. But I do appreciate this particular part because, yeah, it does kind of expose all of Superman's lore and past enemies, as per Zod here. And a very intriguing aspect of the Phantom Zone's kind of revealed in this narrative. But I bring this part up and I do highlight this because it does kind of create a bit of a paradox and a major flaw in this narrative by the end. There's a certain aspect of this I'll get back to a little bit later. But nonetheless, it's just a constant guilt trip for, of course, Clark here. He just keeps thinking, had he made different choices when he was younger, would it have made a huge difference or not? But nonetheless, the story's still going to go through its motions, right? So yeah, now he's trying out the Legion of Superheroes, even futurists and whatnot, even Brainiac 5, who still can't figure out how to help Lex. Even Superman somehow brings him back to now the present with, of course, the island of Themyscira. I guess maybe they have some technology or magic. Even though you see this scene here, of course, Superman's good nature will still win people over and still get people to try and help. As mentioned, this is more of like a tour of the DC universe and Superman's lore. Even going back to like his time with his old girlfriend, Lori Lamaris. Yeah, this woman here. So yeah, he even brings Lex down here because even they have tech that might be able to help or not, right? But I pretty much stopped reading this book at the second issue because, yes, there was a huge hiatus before the third issue finally came out. And when it did finally come out, boy, I tell you, the whole heel and reveal of the narrative, it really felt empty because it went right with the obvious kind of plot and the obvious kind of effect to it all. But there does come a point in this narrative as well where, yes, basically another threat is now attacking the Earth. And again, for whatever weird reason, Mark Waid, he chooses to go with this idea that a lot of Superman writers tend to make a mistake with. They end up belittling all the other heroes of DC and all the other writers and authors and artists of DC who have, helped all these other characters build up. What I'm referring to is that basically all the other heroes of Earth can't seem to stop the threat. Only Superman can. But it kind of doesn't make sense if that's the case, because it's not like the other heroes can do what he can do, if not better, right? Again, this is just my own personal criticism at this point. But it does create a bit of a paradox, this true ending of this narrative, where, yes, the book does live up to its title, but there's a certain event that happens that just makes you wonder, was it all for the right reason? Was the juice worth the squeeze? Or was saving somebody like Lex Luthor worth it in the end, or even attempting to? At what cost? And by the end of this narrative, you realize that the cost, if you really think about it, it was too great to save Lex Luthor. And yeah, by the end of this narrative, you'll kind of now understand what I'm referring to at the very beginning with Clark and his beard. It's a very subtle thing. It's probably one of the most tasteful aspects of this book. But like I kind of mentioned earlier, the juice not being worth the squeeze, that's pretty much how I feel about this particular narrative. It's a good story, but it's certainly not one I would say you need to own. And it's actually a narrative that I'm actually going to leave off of my shelf, surprisingly. So my recommendation is this for this book. Certainly read it before you even consider a purchase, because you may start to notice the flaw in the overall narrative. Like, Mark Waid had a good idea at the beginning, but he didn't stick the landing. The art that you saw throughout the book by Bryan Hitch, it's serviceable, but it's nothing highly evocative either. It really is just by the numbers. And I like Bryan Hitch, He did like Cap Reborn. He did, some Justice League. He did that Venom series not too long ago. And it's serviceable art, but it's not really anything that's going to make you like remember it or have any sort of, poster on your wall of any particular image. But that's just my 2 cents on the matter. Honestly, I would give this more like a C- kind of story. It's serviceable. It's not terrible, that's for sure. But for a book with a title, The Last Days of Lex Luthor, I suppose we deserved a little bit more. A bit more thought-provoking narratives, maybe being worthy of that black label, right? But that's, again, just my 2 cents at the end of the day. My apologies for being overly critical this time, but yeah, it didn't grab me the way I expected it to. And that's just my 2 cents on the matter. And hopefully I get to read your comments down below as always, because I'd always love to hear what other folks think about it. But in either way, y'all enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.